The Stitch Book 1. The Legend's Real. Hey guys, haven't you heard that some little girl was brutally murdered in the shrine in the northern part of the city? Yeah, you mean the one with the legend? Gulps. Yeah, since we are camping near that shrine, who's got the guts to check at that abandoned shrine? No one answered. Oh come on you wussies, he said. Anyway we're here, I'll set up the tents. With the girls, you go get some firewood. One of the girls said I'll go with Max to get the wood. Max nods and said, alright, just keep up. As they left the area, John, Sammy, and Angel began to set up the tents. 45 minutes later. Max and Amy haven't come back, and we finished 30 minutes ago. I've got a bad feeling. John said as he sat on a rock. You may be right, Johnny. We should probably search for. A small bloody hand went straight through Sammy's heart. She coughed out blood and turned her head. I'm the Stitch, you are all in my territory, John and Angel screamed and tried to leave the forest before they died next. The Stitch pulled out Sammy's heart and smashed it. The Stitch then began to walk towards the last two teens before they escape. The Stitch threw a piece of glass at John like it was a speeding bullet, causing him to fall down. John knew. Angel shouts. Johnny shouts keep running. John was then brutally cut with the glass. He was then stitched, just as the monster was. There we go, now you're just as beautiful as I am, the monster chuckled. She then showed up and looked around for Angel, but there was no sign of her. She'll be back, and when she is she's mine, the Stitch said as she dragged the three bodies into the shrine building. The Taken. Years after the murders and police investigations, Angel was put into a mental rehab building and she said don't go in there at night, the Stitch will kill you and anyone who enters her territory. Unfortunately, 12 more people have gone missing in just 2 weeks. Tell us what or who is this, Stitch, you speak of? Angel said, the Stitch is the Shrine Princess's little sister. She seeks revenge for her murder. She'll kill anyone she sees in her forest. The room became silent, until the psychologist said, Really? It's her? Angel was paralyzed, staring at the window. The Stitch was staring at Angel with her empty, black eyes. Angel? Angel, are you okay? Angel had been killed from an unbelievable amount of fear. Angel? Angel. The Stitch walks through the window and grabbed Angel's body, dragging it into the forest. The psychologist was paralyzed in fear upon seeing the Stitch, unable to save Angel. After snapping out of that state and leaving her office, the person was crying. I couldn't save her. And Angel was right, it was her. What am I to do? She sobs. Suddenly, she saw a pair of white Stitch legs in front of her. You couldn't save her because she was bound to die, after entering my territory. There's no way to survive for long. The woman looks up and said, you are the Stitch? Is what Angel said true? The girl sat down and said, yes, all of it is. I'm leaving now. I won't kill you now, because you were my big sis's mentor. The girl vanished into thin air. Mentor? The woman said as she trembled in fear. You okay, ma'am? A voice came from beside the lady before she blacked out. The story of the Stitch. It was 1982 AD. I was playing with Gilbert, my cat, and my sis called me and I went to the kitchen with Gilbert in my arms. Yes, big sis. April, my big sis says I'm going to go shopping. Do you want anything? Gilbert meows and I said, Gilbert needs food and snacks. I want some strawberry milk. April nodded and grabbed her wallet and closes the door, causing a mask that had stitches on it to fall. Gilbert jumps down and walked over to it. He hissed at it. What's wrong, Gil? I walk over to the mask, and pick it up. Gilbert ran out of this room at fast speeds. I raised a brow and put the mask back where it was. I walk over to my room and began to watch TV. After a while, the power went out, and I heard knocking sounds on my door. "Sis? Is that you?" I asked. "No reply, sis," I said as I opened my door, but what I had just encountered was the most terrifying thing. The stitched mask had taken a physical form. It grabbed me by the throat and carried me to the kitchen. "Sis. She was dead for a while now. You will get something better," the demonic voice said. It lifted a massive knife up and began to carve out my eyes from their sockets. Then he ripped off part of my face, stitching it back on. Finally I died, but not before it stitched my mouth shut and saying, "Perfect, now we are one." He puts the mask on my face, and his existence entered my body, turning me into what I'm known as the Stitch. Police losses. After the psychologist is rushed to the hospital, the police change their strategy. He expanded the search perimeters. Little did they know that they're entering the Stitch's territory. Day and night, more and more police officers and civilian search parties were missing. Eventually the police were getting fearful and unwilling to search the woods. So the sergeant went in alone. Big mistake. But he discovered something amazing. He'd found the shrine house. So he took a picture and sent it to his boss. But was never heard from since. The captain was astonished from this discovery, that he called the military police in to investigate. "How can we be sure that isn't fake, Captain Smith? My best man has been gone for 2 months, Commander Jackson." "That's proof enough." The commander nods and orders his men to gear up. "We're leaving in 20 hours. You owe me, Captain." He nods and waits till 8 p.m. The MP began their investigation in the forest from foot and helicopter. Safety off, men. Apparently the captain claims that something called the Stitch lurks here. It's said that it kills anything and anyone that enters these woods. His troops chuckled and said, "The hell kinda name is that?" As they advanced, the commander did a head count. "We're 1 man short. Has anyone seen Private Miller?" The men looked around, but as they turned around, Miller's body hung in front of them from a tree. They looked up and saw a small child wearing a stitched mask and with white hair staring at them and laughing. "You fools are in my territory." A sniper round from the helicopter hit the mask, shattering it to pieces. The girl's face made every soldier barf. Her eyes were gone, her left side of her face had clearly been torn off and stitched back on. Her mouth was stitched close. The girl wasn't moving, breathing, nor moving. Just standing on top of the tree. What the hell? What happened to the poor child? Commander Jackson asked in sorrow. However, as the helicopter lowered down to get the child, she stepped onto it and killed the sniper and both pilots, causing the helicopter to crash. She walked through the helicopter unscathed. A monster's love. A young teen, maybe 18 or 19 years old, walked into the entrance of the forest. Stitch walked towards him with the intent to kill him. "Haley!" the boy cried. "Hey, Lee!" Stitch cried. The boy said, "I've been looking for you." Haley's claws shortened as the boy hugged her. She blushes and said, "Shade?" She hugged him back and said, "Where have you been, you jerk?" Shade apologized and said, "My parents divorced and I was forced to be with my psychotic father in Illinois." Haley kissed him and said, "I'm sorry to hear that." She rips at his heart and said, "I'm sorry, but 6 years is unforgivable." Shade smiled and ripped her heart out too. "You're right, so let's make these years count, in the underworld." The two kissed one last time before turning into ashes. The commander said, "Ashes to ashes. Dust to dust." The return of the Stitch. Reassuring safety or. Several years have passed since the Stitch had disappeared. Many families and communities have worked hard to make a community theme park of the Stitch onto of the shrine. Little did they know, that their actions have angered the gods massively. So much that they will eventually return the Stitch to the human realm to punish them for breaking sacred grounds. "Mommy, look," a child shouted, pointing to a little girl wearing the mask of the Stitch, holding a mesh sheet, covered in blood. The woman knew that this wasn't right. The Stitch began to walk to them, with every intention to kill. She grabbed her child and triggered the emergency alarm. The Stitch, she's back, run! The families and co-workers ran as many were being brutally murdered by the child. However, the Stitch stops and lifts her mask. The children began to walk over to her and say, "You humans have broken sacred grounds, you've destroyed and incinerated the shrine of the gods, you shall be punished." The kids have been absorbed into the Stitch, making her even more powerful. As Emily sat on top of a tree, she saw some familiar faces. Commander Jackson. She chuckled. She puts her mask back on and jumps down, waiting to finish what was started. Rebirth of the monster. Black wings and red eyes appeared from the Stitch's body as she kills guards and civilians in cold blood. "You've angered us. You violated sacred laws. Through this demon we give power to return the favor," the gods shout through the Stitch's voice. The humans finally made it out of the forest, where the monster cannot leave. Thousands have died and were dragged to a small area just behind the main building to be devoured by the Stitch. "My name is Emily, you humans have angered the gods, your eyes are now mine." The girl ripped out the eyes from the corpses and attached them to a necklace around her neck. The eyes were now glowing blue and black, showing that the gods have only just begun to retake their shrine. Emily puts her mask back on and sat on a pile of bodies. Let the game begin. As Emily waits for the military police to enter the cursed forest, she began to destroy the theme park piece by piece and rip the pieces to shreds. "My dearest sister has to be here somewhere." A bullet whizzed past Emily's face, hitting the sign right next to her. She stopped and turned around. "Back from where are we now?" Emily said from the top of a tree. Commander Jackson pointed his rifle towards the Stitch and shot her. "Ow, that hurts, have you no respect for a lady?" Emily said sarcastically. She jumped down and took his rifle and said, "No wonder why it hurt, this is a M82A1 Barrett, now what way shall I punish you, let's see." As she pulled the bullet out, she had an idea. "Commander, why don't we play a little game? You and your crew try to survive here as I play the hunter." Hunters and the hunted. As he was deciding, Emily took everyone's weapons and hid them throughout the forest. "All right, we'll play your game, what if we win?" Emily smiled and said, "Then you can live, have your weapons back, and leave." The squadron nodded at their leader and said, "Let's do this, but wait, we only have our flashlights." Emily vanished and it became rather dark, so dark, that nobody could see. The commander pulled his flashlight out and shines it on his squad, so they could pull theirs out. "Spread out. She must have hidden our gear and weapons around the forest, whistle if you find something." Jackson shouts as he walked into the darkness. Hunter and the hunted. After about 5 minutes of searching, Private Johnson whistles, after finding his Bowie knife. He got it and heads east, but as he walked a bit further, Emily jumps on top of him from a treetop and rips his throat out with her fingers. Another whistle was given by the commander himself. He'd found his rifle and pistol under a pile of brush and dirt. Emily traveled from treetop to treetop, giggling creepily as she gets closer to the commander. However, as Jackson checked his rifle magazine, it only had one bullet left. And he hasn't found his best yet. His pistol only had 3 rounds left in it, so he cocks it and looked around him for Emily. Suddenly, he heard 2 of his men screaming. So Jackson runs towards the scream only to find that his entire squad were either smashed, gutted, and hung with their necks ripped out and their eyes missing. Upon seeing this, he looked up and saw her. Emily was licking her blood-soaked fingers and looked down at him. Jackson ran as fast as he could for what seemed like miles until he tripped over something. "Our vests?" he said as he pulls magazines and bullets from them, loading his weapons for his final stand. "You found them, but it's too late, Jackson," Emily said from behind him. He tried to punch her, but his throat was pierced by Private Johnson's Bowie knife. There, I'm sure your death will be painful and brutal," Emily said as she ripped out his eyes. She dragged his body to the entrance and hung him with the others and said, "Ee-hee-hee. That was fun, let's play again sometime." "Oh yeah, I nearly forgot, I win," she chuckled. The funeral for heroes. As Emily walked towards an area where her sister was buried, she found a scroll. "This is." She opened it and puts her mask back on and began to read the scroll. "The one who reads this scroll will soon be free of the cursed forest." "That's right, I mean you, best little sister. My dearest Emily, we were trapped in this forest by Father. Now that you've found my letter, you may now be free to roam the outside world. Just read these words and you shall be free to roam outside. Will you, Big Sis Allison?" Emily was crying and hugs the scroll. "Sis, thank you." Emily wiped the tears from her face, walked towards the entrance of the forest, dragging the bodies with her. Emily liked their playtime and therefore buried the soldiers' bodies and burning their names into the dirt with magic. "Now, let's play some more games, outside." Captured? As Emily was walking through town, she saw all sorts of things that she wanted to do and buy, sadly though she couldn't. Because everyone feared her and ran away. Eventually she got tired of this and began to threaten those who tried to run. "I just wanted to eat and buy things in peace and harmony, is that so wrong?" she shouts out loud. A voice said, "Freeze. Put your hands in the air." Emily was sick and tired of this nonsense, so she turned around and walked towards the police officer, taking bullets left from right until she stood in front of him. Will you buy me some food and art supplies? I'm starved and bored," Emily asked politely. The young teenage police officer holsters his gun and looked into Emily's eyes and said, "You're cute, sure I will. But you'll have to surrender though." Emily blushed and hugs him. "Thanks, I will." The young officer puts her in his car and drove her to the station, locking her up until he got back. He wasn't proud of what he'd just done, but he bought her the stuff and returned. Before he could get to the cell room, he was stopped by the sergeant and was promoted. Still, he didn't think that someone like her deserves this. After all, she was murdered in cold blood and possessed. He walked over to her and opened her cell up, pulling her out. As they walked through the back door, Emily kissed him and walked to the asylum 12 miles north, ready to accept being captured. Purified mask and true freedom. After arriving at the asylum, Emily was taken in and tossed into a white room, completely restrained. "Oh, what kind of mess have I gotten into?" she asked herself. Then she saw her mask slip itself under the door. "You're in a military asylum, why have you allowed these peasants to capture you?" Love, or maybe, the spirit in the mask asks. Emily burst free from her restraints and stood over the mask and said, "It's because I am free." The stitch once again gives Emily its power. She kicked the door down and walked out of the isolation room. The alarm went off as Emily was constantly being shot and stabbed. As Emily reached the hallway where the others were held, she brought down the doors and freed the prisoners. Suddenly, Emily saw her sister's spirit. She was shaking her head, lifted the cursed mask from Emily's face, kissed her forehead, causing Emily to stop and cry. The soldiers stopped upon seeing the priestess and kneels down. "Let her go, the mask has been purified," April says as Emily walked towards the exit. Emily walked outside and saw the entire city's population standing in front of her, holding their hands toward her. Emily was crying in front of them and they all hugged her. The young officer walked up to her and kissed Emily. "It's okay, everyone has been freed from their fears and hatred towards you," Emily cries in his chest, and